Hello and welcome back to the Game Room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them, or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 1,820 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. We've done it again. We are 1/5 of the way to 1,980 subs away, 180 subs away from 2,000. Thank you all so much. Every week I'm going to say it. Every week, thank you again. But that's not why you're here today. Today is Halloween. Happy Halloween, everyone. And yes, I probably should have released a video like this earlier in the month so that you could actually play these for Halloween. But hey, bookmark this video and do it next October. But here, we're going to talk about some fun games to play around Halloween. Let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Alright, so I said it a bunch of times, I'm not the biggest fan of scary games, but I do dabble in them, and, you know, Halloween games in general can run the gamut. More of it is just, is it the game in the spirit of the holiday, and as such, a lot of the games I'm going to be talking about tend to be more of the retro side, just because they aren't really so scary. But we do have a few scary ones, including a game that I covered this year that was the first game I ever beat in this series, first time I ever really put any serious time into any of them, and that's because it was a recommendation from one of my Patreon supporters, and that was Silent Hill. And Silent Hill, if you're looking for a good time on Halloween, I can't think of a better one. It's short and sweet, it's a lot of fun, it's got that old school PS1 jankiness, and it messes with your mind a little bit, but in the right way, and it gives you that visceral sense of dread while playing it, that you really are like, don't go in there, don't move in there, but obviously as the player, you have to make yourself do that because you got to keep going forward in the game. And it's really, really fun. I was genuinely surprised by how much I did enjoy this, because I've always been more of a Resident Evil person, and if you remember back in the 90s, that was a heated debate. Were you survival horror or were you psychological horror? Now they kind of been lumped into the same thing, but Silent Hill on the PS1 is a lot of fun. I know it's super expensive. I think you can download it on the PS3 eShop, if that's still a thing now, but no matter how you can play it, give it a shot, because it is surprisingly enjoyable, even now in 2023. Now, I mentioned Silent Hill. We're going to get another easy one out of the way. So I had a hard time narrowing down which one on the PS1 I wanted to talk about, so I'm just going to talk about all three. So you got Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 3. I'd probably recommend the first two over the third one, just because the third one kind of falls off for me. I'm not a huge fan of an unkillable enemy that stalks you through the game, and that's pretty much the name of the game in the third one. And I'm not mentioning Code Veronica just because it doesn't quite feel as Resident Evil as 1 through 3 for me, and 0 is just Anyway, these are the ones I want to focus on. Well, let's talk about Resident Evil 1. So this was probably the one that genuinely had me the most spooked out of it. The part where the hunter comes in around mid-game just scared the hell out of me. The bad voice acting it increases the enjoyment for myself. Really reminds me of that B horror movie experience. And you're in a spooky mansion. I mean, that's got Halloween written all over it. So really, when it comes down to why the series started off on such a great footing, it was this. Even though I got into the series because of the second one, waiting for the next one to come out, I bought this, and then that really cemented how much I enjoy the series going into the second one. So yeah, have yourself some Jill sandwiches, be wonderful. Alright, and then lastly here for the PS1, actually no, I got another one, but yeah, let's talk about another PS1 game. So this is a game that, God, it was so popular, at least it felt that way with me and my friends group growing up, and then it just disappeared. And the thing that really made it disappointing is that the game set itself up like there was going to be more, but nothing really came of it. At least not in the way we thought it would, almost the way that Banjo-Kazooie did. And that game was Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver. And in this, you're playing as a vampire. It had gorgeous cutscenes to start it off, and it was just a very interesting game. It had executes you could do in it, and it just it felt, you know, it's funny. Games like Darksiders and God of War would take this formula and refine it a lot, but it really did start with this, where you had the 3D action environment where you slowly get new abilities, even a little of Symphony of the Night DNA in this too. And it's just a really fun, enjoyable experience, going around sucking people's souls and all that, and traversing back and forth between, I think it was the world, the land of the dead and the land of the living. At least when you die, you go into a ghost spirit, something of that nature. But a really solid game. And a fun one I always think about when it's around October, just because it's not spooky, but it's fun. It's a very genuinely enjoyable time, and people don't really talk about it. All right, now this was the last one on the PS1. So another game that I recently played. It was not this year. I think it was last year at this point, because time is going quickly. And it's a game I always wanted to check out. It is an RPG by Square, and it's got great thematics to it. Perfect for the season, Parasite Eve. So this is a game that starts off with an opera scene where people start bursting into flame, and it never lets up. You go through and you find out all these. I mean, New York City becomes almost a empty, chilling hellscape because of this symbiotic, crazy lady thing that's going around just destroying, bursting people into flames. And it's a very unique combat system. It's got a lot of replayability. There's an entire optional area that opens the true ending after you beat the game the first time in the Chrysler Building, and it's just fun. It's got good atmosphere to it, and it's perfect for that Halloween season. And God, your cop buddy, I can't remember his name, but he is so amazing. They should just make a whole game around him, because he punches first and takes names later, and you love him for it. All right, moving on to the Game Boy. So this was a game that I didn't know of when it came out. It had a re-release recently, and it is one of the more pricier games on the Game Boy. It uses a mechanic where you control a little ghost and you control various different characters, and that game is Avenging Spirit. And it's just a really fun idea that, you know, I haven't opened up my Game Boy copy yet just because I haven't gotten around to it, but is just really cool. I love ideas like this where you can control different characters throughout the levels. I know there's a game on the GameCube called Geist that supposedly has the same kind of mechanic, and I feel like I've heard about this mechanic so often, but I never actually played any games that use it. So this is one that I'm looking forward to, and I wish I'd played this Halloween, but now it's run out of time. Alright, now here's one that is just a Halloween staple, and you could play all of the NES ones. You could play any of the games, really. But I just want to talk about the original, which was the original Castlevania. Because it goes through and you're fighting the mummy. You're fighting Dracula the bad guy. You're fighting... there's not really the creature of the Black Lagoon, but everything else really is in this game. And it's just a lot of Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster, if you want to be semantics. And it's just fun. It's not an easy game, by all means. Ask my wife. It's not an easy game. I remember for Noob Gamer, I had her play trying to take down Dracula, and she only got the first form down, which was the whole point. And that took her a couple of hours. But it really, when you think of classic platform gaming, you can't get anything. I mean, you can, but you can't really get much better than this type of game. And it really did launch 1,000 ships as far as cool games in this series, and it's still going strong to this day, and perfect to check out around a Halloween. OG Castlevania. Now, a game that I played a few years ago around Halloween that actually was the PS Plus download game that month was Vampire. Now, Vampire is not a perfect game. By all means, it is not a great game. But for cheap, it's fun. And if you're not like me and can go around just killing whoever you want and eating every NPC, it probably is even more fun. Because the way the game works is that you're given let's say you're given a group of 20 different NPCs you can interact with, but at any point you can consume them and then increase your power, but by doing that you make the rest of the world harder. So it's kind of a give and take if you should do that or not, though you know, as being a vampire, for the immersion of it, you probably should, but I avoided it. I avoided it my entire run through, and I wish I hadn't, because I feel like I limited myself on the amount of fun I had, but it is a decent enough game. Nothing crazy, nothing, I mean, I know when it came out, a lot of people were disappointed because it sounded a lot better on paper than what it was, which makes sense, which is a perfect type of game, though, to pick up for cheap. And so I would check out Vampire. That'd be another fun one to check out here during the Halloween season. Now, this is a game that is completely zany and nuts, makes no sense, and is completely off the wall and perfect for Halloween, and that is Monster Party. So Monster Party is a very, very enjoyable NES game, and you go through, I think it's 7 different levels. Originally, your character gets approached by some bird dude who takes you to the Halloween realm, and you're just going around fighting these ridiculous monstrosities. At one point, you take on Audrey 2 from Little Shop. I think there's food that attacks you at some point. It's all over the place as far as the tone goes, but it's consistently enjoyable. It's one of those games that if you know anything about the way games get translated or changed from the Japanese release to the American release, it's kind of interesting to look into it to see the additional graphical prowess it had on the Famicom. But all in all, it is a solid game and well worth checking out and fits the theme perfectly. Now, another NES game, this one unfortunately we didn't get, but is very, very cool. In a lot of ways, it's the progenitor to the Resident Evil series, and it's based on a movie, and that game is Sweet Home. Now, if you know, you know. This is a very interesting game because it's an RPG, but if your character dies, they're dead permanently, and then that adds to the game. And then it's an RPG, so it's turn-based strategy, but you can separate your main group into by themselves or have them group up, and then they look throughout a mansion to find key items that allow them to progress throughout the mansion. Sound familiar? Yes, that's why a lot of people say this is the progenitor to Resident Evil. Now, it's kind of dicey how much that is true, but it does sound like, I think the original Resident Evil was being made as a remake of this game, and then it got turned into its own thing. But it's very, very easy. If you play through this, it's very easy to see, especially with the Resident Evil 1 and 2, to see kind of the stylistic choices that were used in that game, then translated to 3D and in a much more, in my point, enjoyable tone. I enjoy Resident Evil more than this, but this is a really fun game and a great spooky time on the NES. All right, and then all right, so these ones are more recent releases for the NES, and I talked to Def about them because I really enjoy them. This might be my favorite Halloween game, which is Haunted Halloween 85. It is a beat 'em up. You're going through it is Halloween 1985, and you're just trying to beat up some zombies and save the day, essentially. And then Haunted Halloween 86, which is the sequel to 85, and it allows you to play as 2 different characters this time with 2 different health bars, gives you more abilities, kind of like the Mega Man versus the Mega Man X style. I actually enjoy this game more, but there's a lot of people who probably enjoy this game more. And they're just really fun, solid, well-themed games for the holiday spirit. And I think you can get them on Steam. You can get them on different platforms. You don't have to just get the NES games, though I enjoy playing newer releases on the NES itself, and these ones play great. All right, last game I have for the NES is... Essentially, it was Bandai Namco's, or maybe it was just Bandai at the time, their answer to Castlevania. So they're like, well, we can't do Dracula since you did it. We're going to do Frankenstein. It plays very similar to a Castlevania Light, but just not quite. And it's most famous for being lampooned by AVGN, a decade ago now. But it's not terrible. I played through this game for the first time when I did a Monster Madness theme, October of 2018, I'm going to say. And I surprisingly had a good time with this game. It is not great, and it's way too damn expensive now, so good luck playing the official copy. But it does have some merit, and it has the guy playing the Frankenstein is ridiculous. There's optional bosses. There's only like 4 stages, if I remember, so it's a very short game. But it just, I don't know what it was about it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed playing through it, and I had fun doing it. It is one of those games where it's NES hard, but it's not NES hard impossible. So take that as you will. All right, now here's one that's a little bit more recent. It just had a remake that I have yet to pick up, but I hear is very, very good. And unfortunately, there was a game that came out last year named Callisto Protocol that tried to emulate what this did, but did not do it as well. And that is Dead Space. And Dead Space, to this day, along with Resident Evil B-Side, is probably one of the scariest games for myself, at least at one point, that I tried to get through. Because legitimately, I tried to play Dead Space after I bought it when I got my Xbox 360. I remember playing it, getting to the first save point, which is after the another thing I had Jen do on Noob Gamer, and I was like, nope, can't play it. Picked it up a couple weeks later, got to the second save point, said, nope, can't play it. And then I don't think I picked it up again for another 8-9 months, something of that. Like, it gave me so much anxiety. I could not get through it for a while. It reminds me a lot of the original movie Alien, just the sense of isolation you feel, especially once Dead Space 2 came out and felt a lot more like Aliens, but is a very, very solid game. I want to check out the remake because I hear great things about it, and I can't think of anything more appropriate for Halloween than something like that bad boy. Now, if you want something that's not quite as actual scary, a great game to play for Halloween, in my opinion, is Luigi's Mansion. Now, I'm still not crazy about the second and the third game. I don't know what it is. It's one of those things where the first game is so contained and perfect, in my opinion, that adding to it, like the second one did with adding multiple houses, or the way the third game just added a lot of repetitive BS with the different floors and just extended the playtime unnecessarily. First game gets it perfect. Going through, getting the different booze, getting the different residents of the house, never overstays its welcome. I think they're making a remake of this for the Switch, or they already did. I don't know. I lose track of this stuff. But the first one is still my favorite of the series. It was the launch title that everyone was talking about when the GameCube came out. That along with Rogue Squadron. And I still to this day very much enjoy Luigi's Mansion. And this is a fun one because you can get it done in a weekend, in a day. I mean, I've beaten this game fairly quickly, and it's always a good time. All right, here's the most recent one I have here that takes inspiration from old school Castlevania. I briefly talked about it in my backlog video, and that is Infernax. And Infernax is a surprisingly deep game. There is multiple playthroughs you can do it. There's multiple characters you can play through the game as, and is exceptionally violent, has choices that actually feel like they matter, and it's just fun to go around and see the different things you can do, and is it's a love letter to the style of Castlevania and Zelda 2 that just is that sweet spot for me and my love of old school platformers. You know, it's not the scariest game, it's not themed around the monsters, but it reminds me a lot of the just kind of a Halloween type Monster Mash type experience, and I enjoy it. All right, last two we got here on physical. First one is a game that was a mystery to me for many, many years. So I don't know about you guys, but do you remember a time when you were younger and you read about a game, or you heard about a game, or saw someone playing it, saw an article somewhere, and then never saw it again and couldn't for the life of you remember what it was? Especially back in the early 90s, there was no internet to look this up. So we had Nintendo Power, but every once in a while my brother would get a Game Pro or EG or some other magazine, and it was in this magazine that I saw a preview for a game that I couldn't remember what the name was. It had a green protagonist that was going around scaring people, and it sounded like such a ridiculously fun time. But as once again, no one knew when games came out, and rarely was I on the radar for Genesis releases. It must have come out, I didn't know what the name of the game was, and I never picked it up. And it took me years to figure out what this game was. I remember looking it up in high school, couldn't remember what it was. In college, couldn't remember what it was. And then finally, maybe in 2012, 2013, I finally figured out the name of this game, and that was The Haunting starring Poltergeist, which ironically, this game came out about 30 years ago. And it looked so ridiculous and was such a unique concept that still to this day, outside of something like, which I didn't even think of this, but Untitled Goose Game, is kind of that same sort of, that vibe where really the main point of the game is to mess with people. and man, do you mess with people in this game. I have yet to put it in. I picked it up. I got a complete in box maybe in 2015, 2014. At the time, it was only about $30. I've just been waiting for some special occasion to play this bad boy. So let me know if you guys have any experience with Haunting starring Poltergeist. It looks like a lot of fun, and man, if anything looks like a Halloween good time, I can't imagine anything else other than scaring people, which really, really is cool. All right, and then the last one we're going to talk about, I don't have it on the TurboGrafx, but I do have the sequel, and that is Splatterhouse. So Splatterhouse, where you look like you're moving through as a giant Jason Voorhees. I haven't played the sequel. I played the original a few years back and did beat it. It is not a perfect game, but it is perfect to play for Halloween. Going around with a 2x4, knocking out giant mucus monsters. And the second one, from what I've heard, is very similar to the first one. I do not have the third game. I'd love to pick that up. It's a little bit different, but it's just a very fun series. It kind of went dormant. They had a remake, or not even a remake, just like kind of a reimagining on the Xbox 360 and PS3 back in 2010, I want to say, which surprisingly that game has gotten more expensive. And I do think on that game they do have unlockable versions of 1 and 2, maybe 3, might be all, I don't know. But yeah, Splatterhouse, a lot of fun to check out on Halloween, definitely fits the spirit. And yeah, I'll have to check out the sequel. But the first one, I did enjoy once I got the dip switches correct on the TurboGrafx controller for the TurboGrafx Mini. Because when I was jumping, it wouldn't allow me to jump, which I don't understand what those things are supposed to do. Anyways, that is a bunch of Halloween games that you guys can check out here in early November. I'm sure I should have got this out earlier, like I said. But yeah, let me know what you think about these games. Let me know if you have some other suggestions. I mean, there's a ton of other Halloween games I could have talked about, but I wanted to focus on some more of these ones this year. Maybe next year we'll do some more modern releases. As a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday. I do have a Patreon. There's a link in the description down below if you want to support me by going to Into the AM and getting some nice shirts that look like you're an adult, as my wife always says. And then just thank you guys again so much for the support. All the comments, the likes, the shares really do help and really do mean a lot, especially as a smaller content creator. I can tell you, you get that feedback, and it is so nice. So thank you all again. Have a nice, safe, and happy Halloween, and we'll see you again next week, all right? It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.